Hey everyone, Genome here, coming at you with another Marvel Strike Force team review. This one, of course, is always going to be aimed a little more at the newer player or maybe rapidly approaching mid-game player. But yeah, the team I want to highlight today is sort of a trap team, but still one that's semi-worthy to go after, and that is the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is interesting in that they're a very malleable team, and they are exceptionally good at one area of the game, but not too useful outside of it. So it's hard for me to really recommend them to the newer player to go for early. In fact, I don't. In fact, I usually say skip Magneto until you get some other more important things built up. And this is not saying they're bad. They're actually very good in, like I said, a few different aspects of this game. But I don't think they're the team that the newer player needs to be worried about because they're not good in all game modes, right? But let's get into what I consider the best team lineup for the Brotherhood, and of course, whether I think newer players should be going for them, and maybe just give a broad, general look at the team itself. So, I think the optimal team is obviously Brotherhood 2.0, and that's all the characters you see on the top row here. They just work the best together, and yeah, they're just really, really awesome for the first two turns of any match, at least when their cooldowns are up. You can also use the old school version, Sabretooth and Mystique, and especially in War, you'll see a lot of mixing and matching, especially with characters like Blob and Magneto. They can go to other teams, but really the core of the team to function at optimal efficiency is Magneto, Pyro, Juggernaut, Blob, and Toad. They just have the most synergies together, and when these guys are working, they are possibly the most synergistic team in the game. Black Order does a lot of stuff on auto. This is somewhat true for Brotherhood, but I don't know. There's no other team in the game that I feel works together so cohesively as this team. Some of the other teams just feel really disjointed to me. Always have, like X-Men even. Feels like it's smoother now with like the inclusion of Beast, but it always felt like things were just bouncing around constantly, and Brotherhood is very straightforward, but especially in 2.0, everything just comes together and works. So let's talk about where they excel first. Brotherhood excels in War. They tear apart a lot of teams that give you fits otherwise. Notable examples of this are, of course, shield teams. Shield teams on defense with Coulson used to be a nightmare for just about any other team but Brotherhood. Brotherhood dismantles them. It takes them a little while because there's some things that Brotherhood doesn't do too well, but for the most part, they can steamroll Fury Coulson shield defense teams, right? They do pretty well against about any other meta teams that's at least susceptible to blinds. You usually don't want to run these guys against Asgardians, and if you do, you might want to vary your techniques a little bit, but they can basically punch across to just about any team out there, with the exception of a few of the most meta teams. Like, I wouldn't take these guys against Black Order, of course, and you know teams like that, and Marauders, you're not going to be able to get past against Marauders. There's just too much healing on that team. But for most other teams, you can at least have a solid outing. Actually, I found they work very well against Power Armor too, because Power Armor doesn't have too many ways of dealing with these guys for the first two turns. I know the first two attacks from Iron Man and War Machine are going to bypass blinds, so a lot of times if you're fighting Power Armor, I sometimes would almost recommend saving your Magneto Ultimate till the second round, because a lot of the first round, the characters are doing stuff that the blind's not going to affect, but that's a whole other story. Long story short, they're excellent on War offense, and they pretty much always have been. That hasn't really gone away. Just be careful of your matchups. There's just a few teams you don't want to be fooling around with this team. They're pretty decent, actually, in Arena. I know the shards vary. I haven't been back down in quite a while. You've been running across a lot of Wave 1 Avengers, probably up to like rank 500 or so. And yeah, you should dismantle them pretty well. And basically any other team you run across at that point, you should be able to take them on. So they're pretty decent in lower to lower mid-tier Arena. And there's some, like in the Gamma Raids, you'll have nodes where you can use X-Men, Brotherhood, and whatever. And they're really good for like usually the first node. Usually they just trounce the first node with no problem, but the problem with Brotherhood's inherent weakness is they have really long cooldown, especially if I have Magneto. So yeah, they're not going to be able to hold up for multiple hard nodes in a row. So okay for ones and twosies, for blowing up a raid node too. So that's basically it. I mean, they're pretty strong in Blitz, but it's Blitz. Who cares? Whatever. RTA, you're going to actually get a lot of wins in RTA with these guys because a lot of teams do not handle Magneto very well at all. And this team, while it's not known for enormous burst damage like, say, a Power Armor team, they are deceptively strong damage dealers because of how they synergize. So let's talk about the synergies just a little bit. Let's get right off the bat. Let's talk about Magneto. He's a legendary character, leader of the team. Don't run Brotherhood without him. My goodness, don't run the team without him. You get him in the Asteroid M event that rolls around every now and then. And since I do expect it to roll around semi-soon from now, probably, who knows, you might want to consider whether you want to go for him or not. To unlock him, it's pretty easy, actually. You only need 5 X-Men or 5 Brotherhood at 5 stars, and then you too can unlock Magneto. Typically, you want to level the Brotherhood to go with him, but, a lot of times, like when I got 7 stars on him, I used Phoenix. So, yeah, who knows? However you want to do it, but he's pretty easy. You just can't use any mutants, though, so you can't go be buying Deadpool or Cable, whatever, and expect to be able to use it. You can't. It has to be X-Men or Brotherhood, so pretty easy unlock. Let's just give a quick rundown of his abilities. Of course, his passive is a wall of text. Is one of the longest walls of text there was in the game when he came out. It's been power crept like crazy, but still super strong passive, and it makes the Brotherhood team basically the powerhouse that it is. Everyone knows his ultimate. You have to know when to use this. Almost 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, you're going to open with this. And not just because of the blind, but basically you're going to throw a blind on everybody who doesn't resist it. And here's what makes this attack so good and unique. It pulls everyone together 2 spaces. So basically you get the 5 characters spread out and they all come within a space of each other. And that comes into play with the synergies of this team. So super valuable move, not just for the blind, but the blind can just destroy you. And it really destroys the AI, because unless they have a cleanse on their side turn 1, they're just going to start blowing their ultimates and probably missing everything, unless you're immune to that sort of thing. So devastating move, and it's kind of character defining. Amazing move too is his special. This is what allows you to do certain things. The old ploy when fighting Coulson teams was to hit Coulson with this for the slow, right? And it would also keep, if like they had Shield Operative or whatever, if they had Shield Operative on team, it wouldn't stealth him, but whatever. The key was to slow down him, but I actually prefer to use this on Shield Security. That keeps his auto taunt at bay, and it sticks there for 2 rounds. They usually don't have a way of clearing that off, and then you can focus down Shield Medic or whatever. That's kind of my strategy with them nowadays, but exceptionally strong move. Works great on characters like the Hulk. Basically, any taunt you can stick us on, you basically remove them out of the game unless there's a cleanse for 2 turns. Really strong move, and of course his basic is just a adjacent, hits fairly hard, but we're not going to talk about that. That's not what makes him great. So Magneto is still not something or legendary I suggest you bother with it first. You pick him up as you go, incidentally, I think, because he's just not really needed for much. Now, there's a few nodes I know people are going to say about in later game nodes that you can use Brotherhood for, which is pretty decent, right? But as an overall team, Brotherhood doesn't have an incredible amount of use for the lower or mid-game player in this team, or in this game. So I'm very cautious when I say to go for Magneto, right? He's worth getting, don't get me wrong, and he's very versatile, but it's not, I think, a real high priority for a newer player. So, just saying that. I say the same thing about Nick Fury and Star-Lord too, so don't get me wrong. Pyro is good because of Magneto. He's a good character on him, but he can't survive on this team anywhere else. He's a super glass king. He has one of the lowest health pools in the game, but he's good. He is so good, but mostly because of Magneto. Because everyone's put together, Pyro is the master of bleeds. With his special, which is incredible. You're stripping off usually defense up and all that, or whatever it is. They got 2 buffs off of them. And then you're stacking bleeds on them, so the whole team is getting stripped and then stacked with bleeds on top of it. Same thing as basic, and a lot of times, sometimes I'll go through a fight without even using his ultimate. It's good for tanks and stuff and extending bleeds, but sometimes he's another very strategic player or character you need to be learning how to use. Good character. One of the best things about him is his passive with applying heal blocks. When an ally drops below 50%, that's huge. This is huge because a lot of times they'll have bleeds all stacked up on him, and healer or not, unless it's cleansed, it's just going to obliterate them. So deceptively strong character. His only real weakness is he is the epitome of a glass cannon, and he has no real burst damage, but he's more of a utility character really than anything. But he's basically, I would say, the prime damage dealer on the team, and I don't know, he's almost like a controller in some ways, you know, the way he does things. So, interesting character. I really like Pyro. Juggernaut, don't run the team without Juggernaut, period. He's a huge damage dealer, believe it or not, for a tank, but you need that time, that breathing space he gives you for 2 turns to get this team functioning and rolling and getting the other team so crippled it's too late for them when they finally start turning things around, right? So Juggernaut is a damage-dealing tank. The only thing that's really a problem with Juggernaut is passive. If Magneto's an ally when enemy attacks, his character fills speed bar 15%. So this means his taunt is not going to last as long, right? Because every time they hit him, he starts speeding up. Now, this is both good and bad. It's good in the fact that it gives you faster access to his ultimate, which is the biggest burst damage this team does, right? But it mitigates somewhat his great tankiness, too, because it just gets over faster. So, good tank, good member of the team. Like I said, don't run it without him. And he's actually a decent standalone tank on his own, by the way, on other teams as well. In fact, he's more defensive on other teams than he is on this one, somewhat, because he doesn't get that speed-up mechanic with Magneto on the team. Where if Magneto's not on the team, it doesn't apply to him. So I've actually ran this guy on Supernatural before. He's also a Mystic, by the way. Blob, one of the most unsung characters in this game. Wish I had more mats to dump into the guy, but I gotta work on other characters right now. This guy is all about his passive and at least what makes him so versatile. Him throwing out deflects to adjacent, make sure he's at the back of a V somewhere, so he can be throwing out multiple stacks of deflects to different targets. So it's great, especially when you're facing speedy teams. He'll be just throwing up these deflects like crazy. So exceptionally strong there. Basically, his role on the team, if you're running 2.0, is to be the initial soak so that everyone can get stuff rolling and Juggernaut can get his first taunt going, because Juggernaut takes a while to get to his first action, right? And then his work is basically done. The really cool thing about Blob, though, other than being kind of a defensive powerhouse because the way he's throwing out those deflects all the time, is every single one of his abilities does some sort of damage. Even buffs, when he self-buffs, he's doing damage to everybody. With Meat Shield, it's great. He throws out a nice little, adjacent attack while he's absorbing buffs, or not so much absorbing, but copying buffs from all the other Brotherhood, which is usually just Juggernaut at that point. So you're going to be tanking again with him. But if you're with Toad, he's going to be auto-tanking at the start of a fight, basically after Toad takes his first turn, and Toad is one of the fastest characters in the game on the Brotherhood 2.0. So chances are he's going to have taunt and defense up on him. He's also going to have offense up on him. He's just a really good character. Not a high damage character, but good incidental characters. Everything he does is pretty useful. In fact, the least impressive thing he has is probably his ultimate. It's just straight damage. But everything else he does is very good and has some sort of either upside for you or downside for the enemy, as 9 just including loss of health on their end. So great character and very essential nowadays for keeping them going. Probably the most versatile member, not even probably, the most versatile member outside of this team too. You can put him anywhere. His passive still works and it's still great. And finally, let's talk about Toad. Toad is another one that's a quiet sleeper character. I'd love to, once again, level him up high to see how well he functions, but he functions pretty well as he is. He's super easy to get hold to. The easiest character on this team to get. He's right there in the Blitz store, so you can get him early. Great on just about any mutant team, to be honest with you, but really what makes him so strong is opening with his ultimate. It's going to be clearing 2 buffs, which usually at the start you'll see a lot of defense ups or whatever like that, or deflects, and he'll clear like 2 of those off multiple characters. And when he does this move, it applies taunt to Blob, and it gives him defense up. So taunt's already a big meat shield as it is, so he just makes it even stronger. So it's basically an auto taunt for Blob, who also has an auto taunt. I didn't mention that before, but Blob is really good. But Toad it makes it work. So in the Brotherhood 2.0, he's kind of the glue here to get things rolling. So Toad is kind of an unsung hero. Acid Spray is really good because there's going to be throwing bleeds and blinds, disrupts all over the place, and he's going to extend this. So great thing, everyone's going to be clumped together unless they resist it. So it's probably also going to hit everybody on the opposing team. So, I mean, none of these guys does huge damage, but the chip damage, when you put it across the whole team, is actually pretty impressive. basic is basic, applies slow. Another really good thing about Toad that you don't really realize, one thing, because the animation is so fast on 3 times, is he's going to be counterattacking a lot. Or assisting that counterattacking, excuse me. Blob does the counterattacking. Once again, Blob is doing so many things, but Toad is going to be assisting all the time on attacks, and it's great. It just starts adding up, and when he's doing that, slow. It's awesome. It really is watching. He's good at finishing. I've noticed him. He seems to activate a lot more often. This is probably just me just seeing things. He seems to activate a lot more often when the character is like in the red. This thing always seems to be attacking. So really good character. I would love to put more into him and the Blob especially, but I can't afford to right now. And just real briefly, Sabretooth and Mystique were the original Brotherhood OGs before the Marauders came around. They still work very well. In fact, Mystique works very well with Magneto. Some of her kit still even says stuff with Magneto in there. So yeah, I mean, applying or keeping positive effects going is always a good, especially when you get Blob on the team, because he gets tons of positive effects from Juggernaut too, right? But yeah, you definitely want to keep these guys on Marauders if you can. So, but you can if you don't have the Marauders built up, and these are the characters you have in Mystique and Sabretooth, feel free to use them on Brotherhood. They still work. It's just not as synergistic and it's just not as devastating as it is. So, Brotherhood are good. Really good at some things. They are just they're just not great at everything. Like I said, they're not a great raid team. They're good for one node, but not much beyond that. They're good to the mid tiers of Arena, but after that they get overshadowed, right? They're pretty good in RTA, but that's not saying a ton of things. But I mean, you'll actually do very well in RTA with Brotherhood 2.0. War, they're basically top tier war offense team, one of the best in the game, outside of like 2 or 3 meta teams that can just kind of these guys can't overcome. So yeah, they're good in a lot of different game modes and only okay in all the rest of them, right? So it's just not much sustain. I wouldn't take these guys into like Dark Dimension and all that. They just, after like a turn or two, when all the debuffs start wearing off on the other team or whatever, the blinds wear off, Juggernaut's no longer taunting, these guys are basically sitting ducks. And with their health pulls, like with characters like Toad, who's a little bit dodgy at least, Pyro is going to fall like that. You know, even Magneto doesn't have a huge health pull, so he'll go down pretty quick. So, yeah, they are not long fight winners. So basically, you win or lose with these guys in the first about 3 turns. And if you haven't got them on death's door by about turn 3, especially with that heal mechanics, you might be in some trouble because they start running out of steam pretty quick. But the synergy these guys have until that point is just incredible, and they're still working together quite a bit as they take turns. Something else I didn't mention too is because of Magneto's passive. These are some of the fastest characters in the game, Magneto and Toad specifically. Toad in almost every matchup is going to be going first, so plan accordingly and pick your targets carefully who you want to. Hopefully they have buffs you can strip, but not always that big a deal. And you have to find out if you want the taunt on Blob. This always worked well for S.H.I.E.L.D. Once again, these guys are tailor-made for S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Because this Coulson would be attacking Blob, then allowing your other guys to do their thing and not getting Pyro blown up or something. But yeah, so Magneto and Toad are going to be super fast when they're all together. When it's all mutants, very few teams or characters might go before them. Zemo and maybe a Korath, a high-end Korath, but I don't know even then. So yeah, very fast. So you're probably going to get your game plan going. So just plan accordingly, and yeah, you too could have great success for Brotherhood. Once again, I still don't recommend you going for the direct farm of them early, but as you pick them up, they're definitely a team you want to go for later on down the road at least, so you have a nice versatile roster in War Team. And like I said, they're good for like some of the Gamma raids where they require Brotherhood characters. And you will, of course, need Magneto for the legendary lanes and the Dark Dimensions, but that's a whole nother can of worms. So anyway, hopefully this long-winded video was somewhat helpful to those who had questions about the Brotherhood. It's a somewhat forgotten team in a way, but you do well not to forget them in War. But yeah, just a cool team nonetheless, and man, it's too bad they don't have a healer on the team. They'd be monstrous. But anyway, I guess you can't make such a Hydra, no pun intended. So anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Genome, out.